Hey guys, this is Jacques from J House, and this is a J House Toolkit production. This is our first ever eavesdrop session where we are partnering with Ways from Imagine Thinking to bring some of the most incredible, inspiring, motivating, and equipping conversations to help you through this coronavirus lockdown and out of this season. So join us today. We're going to be speaking about taking responsibility in this trying time and how that is going to catapult you into the next season to be more successful than you ever thought possible. So join us in this. Don't forget to let us know in the comments what you thought about the session and any questions that you might have that we could help you with along your specific journey. We hope that this is going to inspire, motivate, and equip you to get into this next season on top. Enjoy. First off, I appreciate you coming back and to discuss a whole bunch of stuff with us. Today, I mentioned we want to speak about responsibility, and the reason for that really is that I think in this time where everything is so uncertain, and the government is doing as much as they can to help everyone in their situation, they can't do everything. They can't make life easy for us. And I think the worst thing that we can do is get into that space where we're expecting them to do that. That we expect after COVID comes that they are going to be able to put in all the systems that are going to help us financially, help us find jobs, whatever the case is, because of the reality of what COVID's lockdown is creating. And I just felt like at this time more than any, the idea of taking responsibility for where we're at and what is actually happening to us and in our vicinity, taking responsibility for that is going to give us the best basis, the best foundation for when you're coming out of it. That if we start understanding that it's going to be our responsibility now, that when we get out of it, what the government's going to do is going to be a bonus on top of what we're planning to achieve and what we can achieve with the mindset that we're going to have. So I know that you've got a very unique view on responsibility. So I'd love you to share it with us. Let us know your thoughts on about it, and then see how we can help people as much as possible.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for the invite again. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's always good to chat to you. I think it's good for me as well to get perspective from other people. So I appreciate the opportunity. Cool. I think that you've raised some valid points around responsibility. And let me just start off by saying this, is that we cannot rely on the governments, because as much as what we're relying on them as an entity, they're also other human beings that are trying to make the right leadership calls with the limited amount of information that they have at the time.
Yes.
And yet they have the responsibility because we've given them that as a mandate to look after us. We voted them in, so it's not a case of now they need to prove themselves. It's a case of now that they need to make decisions, and that in itself is a big responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I think we should be judging them for, but supporting them in.
Yeah.
Is how do we support our governments with the decisions they're making? For one, the responsibility of staying at home. And acting wisely and not going out there and risking, if you don't care for yourself, risking somebody else. So it's the responsibility of us. I think that the world and our world is not the government's responsibility. It's not organizations' responsibility. It's not the corporate world's responsibility. It's not even the church's responsibility. I think it's our responsibility.
Yeah.
So that's just to frame my perspective on what you were saying. But responsibility is, for me, something that is taken, it's something that is given, it's something that is shared, it's something that I think is learned, and something that is risked as well. So if you look at the word responsibility, I love to play with words and break things up. It's responsibility. It's the ability to respond. If you look at the word just response, it's a reaction to something.
Yeah.
Are we reacting to this in the right way? Because I think that in the world that we live in the climate that we're experiencing at the moment, we are responsible to something and for something. We're responsible to each other in a way, and we're responsible for each other, and definitely for ourselves in a way. So it's not about overreacting. It's about reacting with a clear mind and a clear focus and attention to detail. And then the ability, I love that word as well, is it's possession of talent or skill or proficiency in a particular area. And I think that is where it's at, is the word skill says that it's something that perhaps is natural, but is trained towards something. So we might not know how to take responsibility right now. And if we don't understand it, the key here is to keep practicing it. It's to practice our ability to respond.
Very good. Very good. So going straight off of that, when you say practice the ability to respond, how does one do that? I mean, if you don't know it already, if you don't know how to respond, or if you've never thought of it in that space, that you can learn it and you can grow in that space, how does one go about realizing when you need to take responsibility and how to do it, to grow in that skill?
Dare I say this, that as soon as you realize that it's time you take or need to take responsibility, it's too late.
Fair enough.
You should have yesterday or the day before, perhaps. But there's no greater time than the present, as a matter of fact. So it's not about what we could have done; it's what we still can do.
Yes.
And inside of that timing around what can we do with what we've got, is saying, hey, listen, maybe it's an attitude thing first and foremost. Cool. That I shouldn't be focusing my attention on this is their responsibility, what are they going to do about it? But saying, hey, listen, the man in the mirror, this is your responsibility. What am I going to do about it? What are we collectively going to do about it? And I think it's about taking the action that you can with the tools that you have.
Gotcha.
We don't all have the same tools, and we don't all have the same skills, the same abilities, the same resources. That doesn't matter. For me, it's around a willingness and an appetite to try something now, and not to wait, but to try it.
Yeah.
To be an opportunist. I think this is an opportunistic climate. It's an opportunistic market that we're operating in at the moment. But if you're going to take responsibility, you need to take responsibility for the risk, and you need to take responsibility for the reward.
Gotcha.
But I think people are they want the reward and they want the romance, but they don't understand the risk and the reality behind it.
100%.
And that's where the real, if I could say it like this, the real heroism lies, is in, are you prepared to just do it?
Yeah.
Just get it done. And we don't know what we don't know. It's going to make mistakes. And I think that's what it's about, is responding and reacting. But you've got to have a perspective where it's okay that we're going to get this wrong, and it's okay to operate with a limited amount of knowledge. Yeah. But we've got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about that, obviously, like you say, it's not about the opportunities that we've missed yesterday or whatever the case is. It's about what we can do where we are right now with the tools that we have at our disposal. But how does someone get to the point where they realize that it's up to them, that they can't rely on someone else? Because I think there's, and I mean, it's thrown around so much, especially in the last couple of years, the idea of entitlement. And I think people kind of get annoyed by it, regardless of the reality of it. Like, how do we combat that mindset of we should get this stuff? I almost feel like, if I could, I mean, I wasn't alive at the time, and I don't think you were quite there. Yeah, I mean, you were alive, but you weren't quite in that space where, we had our parents who went to the army, went to the police force. They had to take responsibility for the nation in some respect, whereas at this point there is none of that. How do we? I don't know if that maybe plays a factor as to why people don't necessarily have that sense of responsibility for their fellow man or whatever the case is, or even for themselves in the space, and that they're expecting it from someone,
Sure.
a third party. What are your thoughts?
I think there's two parts to that answer then, perhaps. Is the first part is how desperate are you
Cool.
to get what you want? What is your appetite?
Yeah.
And what are you prepared to do within legal and moral parameters to achieve that? Because when you're hungry enough to do something, when you want to achieve something, whatever the goal is, if it comes down to appetite, comes down to hunger, I think that, it was once said that the most dangerous thing ever is a man with a vision.
Yeah.
So what is your vision? What do you want to achieve? And then the second thing is you spoke about, people who haven't taken responsibility, and you were, I think, alluding to generations, specific generations.
Yeah, I think that's where I've broken it down. Well, not necessarily broken it down, but I've seen, everyone's seen the generational gap in that space with the responsibility.
Sure.
Well, the let go of the word, the entitlement. I think most people see it as a generational thing.
Sure, and so let's put a title to that, because I think we're all talking about millennials.
Sure, and they're often,
or a lot of people have been, and one of the things I keep saying to people is give them a break. For crying out loud, give them a break. And the reason we need to give them a break is because we've been given many breaks in our lives, okay?
Yeah.
But the second thing is give them a break because we're the ones who created the monsters anyway, okay? So we always like the generations pre-millennial, and I'm kind of borderline there as well. So I'm fortunate enough to kind of be in a bit of a gray area here in terms of my generation. But if guys went to the army versus guys who never made it, I never made it into the army, but I was brought up in a house where it might as well have been, because I had some pretty strict rules to follow and things that we needed to do and disciplines. Sure. Where we talk about the fact that, some generations don't want to take responsibility. Yeah, but here's the deal. We don't want to give it to them because we don't trust them enough.
Gotcha.
And I think that what we've done as a society is we've labeled them so badly that they're living up to the reputation that we've already created for them.
That's so good.
So maybe it's time that we actually say, instead of you not taking responsibility, let me take the responsibility in giving you some. Yeah. And let them win in that regard first.
Yeah, very good. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that. The idea that the responsibility has to be given. And we see this knee-jerk reaction from generation to generation. I know that I can't remember who was speaking about it. They were discussing how in the States you had the generation that went through the Great Depression then wanted to give their kids everything, and then so the kids never had to needed to be brought up in a space of, well, we need to work for it because our parents went through the Great Depression. They don't want us to feel what they felt, so they're giving us whatever we need, and that created almost a suction where they are just taking what they can get, creating the next collapse in the economy, which was in 2008. And now they've just come out of that one. This is a natural thing that's coming in place, but I think the mindset also has to stay the same thing. We need to understand, yes, there's been that, there's been the previous generation who's created us with the expectations that we have of life, but it's still our responsibility to adjust our mindset to realize what is it that I believe, what is it that I see as reality, because I can't rely on someone else's perspective in order to guide my life. Everything that we believe today has in some part been a part of someone else's ideology. I think what happens is today that we get to as we're growing up, every single person, their life, their view of life is built around the environment that they've been in, whether from home, school, whatever the case is, the things that they've experienced builds their view of life. And so everyone's going to have a different one. However, once we get into that space where we become our own person, when we step out of the house, when we take on the responsibility of a job and fending for ourselves, we've got to, I think too many people at this point are holding on to that view of life that they had before the responsibility, which is not serving them well in the responsibility. I think the biggest responsibility we have is to take a step back and say, whoa, this is how life has been portrayed to me up until now, but that's not necessarily the reality of life. That is people's decisions that I happen to be a part of their family or the friendship group going through school or whatever the case is. Let me analyze my life. Let me analyze how people respond. Let me actually be present in my life to the point where I can say, I do agree, I don't agree, come up with my own ideology for myself, my own vision. Like you said, a man with a vision is a scary thing. So I think just on that point is that the millennials, yes, on one hand, they've been dealt a difficult hand. And I say that because I do fall into the millennial gap, or the millennial span. So we have been dealt a very interesting hand, but again, it's our responsibility that we've got to take. And I love how you said the whole desperation thing. It depends on how desperate, how badly you want it. Friedrich Nietzsche said, let me just get the exact wording for you. He said, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how.
Correct.
And I think that's probably the most important, the most powerful thing we can think at the moment is how desperate are we to live a different life, to provide a different life, especially in this time now where people have such doubts about where things are going, what their future is going to look like. Do we allow ourselves to feel the struggle, or do we expect an out? Because only once we feel the weight of it will we do what it's going to take to progress in a beneficial manner, to produce in ourselves the power, the confidence that we need, go through the struggles, be willing to face those rejections, be willing to face the struggles, be willing to just put our foot down and say, you know what, I'm not going to accept what life has dealt me. With whether it's someone else's input or not, this is where I am. Accept it. Go from here.
Sure.
So I think that for me is, when it comes to responsibility, is a big thing, and I think it's because I deal with it as well myself. Did you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's parenting and leadership are very closely linked, and I think that we're not talking on parenting, we're talking on leadership, we're talking on life, we're talking on responsibility. But I always say that my parents didn't teach me how to be a parent.
Yeah.
My kids are teaching me how to be a parent, and what do they know about parenting?
100%.
Okay. So I'm learning responsibility as I go along, as a parent, as a leader, whatever the case is. But it's the responsibility of parenting to stop helping kids. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what do you mean, Wes? You're crazy. How could we stop helping our kids? I think we get to the point where we help them so much, we're not helping them anymore.
Yes.
Let them stretch up. Let them get that cup by themselves. If they fall, they fall. Catch them, obviously, and this is within reason and context.
Yeah.
But there's strength in struggle. And I think that what's happened is that the generations have started to get a lot weaker because our village has become smaller. And it's a funny thing because, the fact that the village has become smaller means that the traditional way of a village bringing up kids has also become a lot smaller. That's where it is the community has, in traditional times, being the ones to bring up the kids and raise families and stuff, and the tribes. But the more that you help somebody, the less that you're potentially helping them. So let them struggle, let them stretch, let them learn, because again, there's some strength in the struggle. And if you look at generations that have preceded us, they went through struggle. And the only problems that we're facing right now are first world problems, because we've got weaker and weaker and weaker. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have those necessarily back in the day. You speak about a generation gap, and I think that is for me also an issue, that there is one, there always has been one, but it's also become common language. Yeah. Gap. So what happens between something? There's this thing, then there's a space, then there's something else. There's this generation, then there's a gap, then there's something else. Now, if we allow that gap to continue, that gap's going to increase. Yes. And neither of us are going to understand each other at all. So I think instead of focusing on the generation gap, we should focus on the generation growth. Good. Because I can learn from one generation, they can learn from me, and the other way around on either side. And then also, I think, to go on what you were saying around, sure, that's the hand that they've been dealt. It's not their fault. Yeah. At all. That's the hand that they've been dealt. But it is their fault if they do nothing with it. Precisely. Okay. So if you've been given a hand in cards and you don't know how to play it, well, you're either all in or you're not. Mm-hmm. So again, it's the responsibility of the person who's been dealt something. Because it might be the toughest thing that you've been dealt, but that's what you have, and are you prepared to do something with it? Yeah. And I think the struggle comes in where we underestimate the potential that we have within ourselves to do something with what we have. And I think that's maybe the most crippling thing, is that we fall back on this. I don't have enough knowledge. I don't have enough skill. I don't have I don't have a big enough degree, or whatever the case is. And we kind of fall into that space of, well, since I don't have what I need, let me therefore do nothing, because correct, I'm worth nothing. I have nothing to offer, which is not the reality of it. People need to understand that. I mean, the fact that you're here means that you've got something to offer. I think, okay, so speaking about leadership just in this context, is leadership is, if we look at John Maxwell's the 5 levels of leadership, once you get past the position that piece of paper or degree or whatever it is that gives you, everything from there becomes your person, who you are, that people start to follow. It's got very little to do with the experience helps, but it's got very little to do with your credentials. That is the lowest level of leadership. It's got far more to do with who you are as a person and whether people want to follow you versus have to follow you. And I think in order to get out of this in a good space where people are thinking, okay, let's look at it and say, how do I position myself to add as much value as possible? When you're a decent person and you want to help people without ripping them off and making it all for yourself, people want to follow you, and you get lifted to a higher level of responsibility, lifted to a higher level of influence, and like Jim Rohn says, is if someone is getting paid more to you for more than you in a particular company, it just means they're adding more value. If you want to get paid more in a particular company, start adding more value. Mm-hmm. And that's more about who you are than it is about what your degree or what you have behind your name or anything like that. Because you can always grow to the future. You don't rely on the past. Correct. Yeah, I think, going back to that, then we've got to kind of question, what is leadership? Because is the 5th level of leadership the ultimate goal, or can we add value at every single level? And I think that's what it's about, is again coming back to, do we have the ability to respond to the people's needs at the level that we're at? Yeah. We might not have the title, we might not have the office, we might not have the 1,000 million people on YouTube, but it's the ability to respond to the people's needs at a grassroots level where you're at now. Yeah. And you'll be at different levels with everybody.
You're not going to be at the
Correct.
same level with every single person that you know. But even in saying that, you cannot lead without taking the responsibility of understanding the weight of it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to start doing things all for yourself and not for them, and then you lose it anyway.
Sure.
So I think what you said way earlier on about the fact that it's an attitude issue is probably one of the most significant things. Is how do we adjust our mindset to adopt the attitude of, okay, yes, I have very little, but even so, how much can I give? How much value can I add, even though I don't have a lot?
Yeah. I think everybody's been given a certain amount of seed. And you will only ever have that same amount of seed if you don't plant it.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to go through the hard yards of digging through some hard soil, perhaps, and getting your hands dirty to plant seeds to make a difference, so that eventually a root can take and then a fruit can develop.
Yeah.
And it's never ever the root that produces more seed. It's the fruit that produces more seed. So even if I've been given a little bit, or even if I've been given a lot, what am I prepared to do with that? Because it's as soon as I give out, it's that generosity, and understanding that I've got a responsibility to and for, and because I've been given. Not how much I've been given, but that I've been given. And I think you used a fantastic word there just now, the word understand or understanding. It's another leadership word for me. It's another relational word for me. It's another communication word for me, is that word understanding. Understand. Isn't that what leadership responsibility is to understand so somebody else can overstand. You see? And as soon as leaders understand that they're there to elevate, it doesn't matter who they elevate. It matters that they elevate somebody else.
That's great. And I think you're 100% on the money there. It's all about lifting people up. And the funny thing about responsibility, as much as it might feel like you keep giving, I love what Pastor Bill Johnson said. I listened to one of his messages a little while ago, and he said, people don't understand the joy that comes from taking on responsibility. Because if we, to put it in terms of how responsibility actually can give us joy for ourselves, is that when we take on responsibility, if we fail at it, we can learn from it because we understand that it was our responsibility in the first place, which means the next time we take a shot at it, we can get better. If we succeed at it and it was our responsibility, we get the joy knowing that it was our effort that we put into it that produced the success. If we have no responsibility, if we fail to take any type of responsibility for us in any situation, then we'll never be satisfied even if we win, because it was someone else's responsibility that the success came from. If we fail, we'll never move forward because, well, it wasn't my responsibility anyway. Why should I care about it? And so we stay stuck in that same level of effectiveness and achievement because we haven't taken responsibility. So if we can understand that the basis of joy itself is taking responsibility, and as much responsibility as possible, I think people would ultimately, though there are challenges and though there are disappointments, still live a much more joy-filled life than without it.
Yeah, I think responsibility gives you a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
As well. If you look at that word, the definition of responsibility, it's the state or fact of having a duty.
Yeah.
I love that. It's the state or fact of having a duty. So what is the duty that I'm here for? Mm-hmm. What do I need to do? So in a time like this right now, where we live in an uncertain world, and uncertainty cannot be the planner of our futures, okay? We've got to know that, hey, listen, it's my duty. I'm being called up by the country. I'm being called up by the business. I'm being called up by the army. I'm being called up by the family. It's my duty. Yeah. And inside of duty is purpose. And purpose is who you are before it's what you do.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what you do. Again, it matters that you do something. Mm-hmm. And if this is a possession of a skill or proficiency, we become more skilled at something that we use on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So right now, don't be afraid of the fact that you don't have the ability to respond in the right way. Be afraid of the fact that you might not have the ability to respond at all.
Yes.
Because it's people who need to respond who will increase their proficiency and skill levels.
Absolutely. And I love that idea of having a duty. I mean, if you think about it, okay, let's make this biblical. Jesus said the greatest love that one can express is laying one's life down for someone else, having that duty beyond yourself to add value to someone, to help someone in some place. Doesn't matter. And talking about laying one's life down is not necessarily to kill one or put yourself in a position where you're going to die. Like that's an extreme of it. But if we can have a look at it as a sense of what to lay down one's life, your life is measured in physical terms by time. You've got X amount of time to give up a portion of that time that you will never get back to help someone else, to lay down your life for that period for someone else, is the greatest expression of love that we can have. No matter, and it's the greatest kind of duty that we can take on ourselves. So I think in this time, especially, how can we in this time give of ourselves to help someone else? Give of our knowledge, give of our expertise, give of our kindness to someone else to help them.
Is that not answering your own question then?
Well, yes. I mean, I guess to a degree it is. But I think so many people find themselves in a position where they don't see that value within them. You can't give what you don't have.
I think, sure. But you can give what you do have. And I think we always focus on the fact that we can't give what we don't have, but you can what you can.
And I think
you can what you do.
And I think the issue is that people, it's not that they don't have it, it's that they don't see it within themselves to give.
Sure.
Or to have.
Sure. I think naturally what we tend to look at is the glass half empty.
Yes.
Oh dear, woe is me kind of thing. And I love the fact that you spoke about, laying down your life for somebody else. It's not necessarily killing yourself. But I think what it is saying no to yourself so that you can say yes to somebody else, ideally, in its most practical way.
Yeah.
Do I need this? Yes. Does somebody else need it more than I do? Probably. Let's give it away.
Yeah.
And if you've we've spoken about this many times, if you keep holding on to what you've always had, that's all you're ever going to have.
Yep.
But as soon as you open up your hand, you will receive something else. Yes, is our life measured practically in time? Absolutely it is, because we've only got a certain amount of time. And we call that our lifetime.
Yeah.
But what about the time of our life? How do we spend that? How do we give of ourselves in time? Because the fact that maybe we're just talking on a video call is you're giving me your time and I'm giving you mine. And this is something that we will never get back again, or will we? Because today, this is the time of my life.
Yeah.
I always talk about the fact that I've got one more day before I die and I'm spending it with you. And quite often when I'm speaking to an audience, they go, oh, what does he mean? Is this guy, is he going to die?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I am. Actually, we're terminally ill, all of us. And isn't that then around leaving a legacy? It's the fact that one day we want to leave a legacy for somebody. Well, how do I know that today isn't that one day? How am I going to measure time? I measure time by doing.
Yes.
I measure time by activity. I measure time by priority. That's the best time management skill that you can actually find. It's not putting things into a calendar. That's not what it's about. Yes, we need order. That's what that's about. But the fact of the matter is, if you're planning on leaving a legacy one day, well, today's the last day before you die. So leave it today.
Yeah.
Because that's when you need the most time. And what do you do with it?
Definitely.
Because I don't think legacy is what we leave afterwards. I think it's what we leave now.
Yeah, I think. How many breadcrumbs can you spread? And are you going to wait to dump the whole packet the day that you die, or you're going to leave a long trail that people are going to be able to follow. And the moment, I mean, to have the idea of adding value right now where you're at, and that people can start picking it up now, even if you don't have this mass amount of people that think you're the greatest thing under the sun, which should never be the case. I mean, you should never be aiming for that. What you should be aiming for is seeing the people who are lost in the forest and who cannot find their way out. And as you're going, taking the responsibility and saying, you know what, I'm gonna leave a trail for people to follow where I've come and find their way, if not out, at least to me, and we can go on the journey together.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful analogy, because are you going to keep the breadcrumbs for yourself and then put them out one day just before you die? Well, guess what? By that stage, they're stale. Nobody wants it. Okay. But as soon as you start laying breadcrumbs down every single day for somebody to pick up, it gives them two things. It gives them direction, and it gives them nutrition.
Good.
Gives them direction, it gives them nutrition. So you're feeding them and you're showing them the way. Okay. But if you hold on to your breadcrumbs just to put it out the day before you die, they're not going to be fed, and they're not going to have any direction. And you're going to be stale at the end of it with a whole bunch of resources and a life that's full of potential, but zero purpose. Yeah.
So one of the greatest quotes, I think, that really stirred me, especially, I'm going to say my younger years, was...
Was that 2 years ago?
A lot can happen in 2 years. I went grey. I had 2 kids. And I cannot remember who said it, but it was essentially the saddest thing in the world is to see someone die at the age of 20 and only get buried at the age of 70. To lose their reason for living, to lose their purpose and their passion for life. And then when they one day get to the point where they physically die, that they get put into the ground, another quote is that your life is summarized in that dash between the date that you were born and the date that you died.
Correct.
What does that dash say about you? How many lives have you impacted? And I think it only does come from taking responsibility, not only for your own life, but trying to add value where you can.
Sure. And I think that dash is important because it gives us a starting point, pre the dash. But so often we want to live life like it's a dash. Let's just do this. Let's just get out of here quickly. It's a marathon. Yeah. And in a marathon, you take breaks. In a dash, in a sprint, you don't. Life isn't a sprint. Life is that marathon. And maybe it's not even just a marathon. It's a relay race where you hand over batons to people and you connect with them. It's a long, it can be, and it should be a long-term thing. Yeah. Giving of ourselves, living legacy, not leaving legacy.
Oh, so good. Living legacy. I love that. And I think on that journey also is that we need to realize that as much as the world is going at such a pace, there's time. You've got time. At least you don't have to expect the return right now. You don't have to. I think people also get stuck for the reason of wanting that instant gratification, that instant reward, like you've mentioned, but that's not the case, and it doesn't have to be the case. We don't have to look for it right now. But the problem is that if we don't start right now, in 10 years' time, when we could have seen that reward, we would still be looking back and saying, wow, if I do this today, tomorrow is not going to bring what it could. And I would rather in 10 years' time look back and say, thank goodness I started what I did when I did. Than say, you know what, I wish that someone once said, I'd rather die with, I'd rather, I should think about these things before I say them. It's 2 R's. I can't remember what it is, but essentially, I would rather have done something and failed at it than live with regret of not doing it at all. And so
Yeah.
to adopt that kind of mindset and to get started, like I said, just do it. Make sure you got the right heart and the right reasons behind it, and then just get started and do it. And see continuously, let the compound effect come into play.
Yeah.
You know, do little things every day so that in 10 years' time you can have a completely different life.
Yeah. And you know what? Never flatten the curve of who you are.
Yeah. Always keep it going up as much as you can.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, I think you speak about regret. My gran always used to say that regret is great, but it comes too late.
Yeah.
You know, by the time that we get it, we know, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done that, but I never did. So yeah, you can either live in a life of regret or you can live in a life of reward. But the question is where do you choose to live? Because inside of that, there's risk.
Yes.
And I think that risk is standing on the edge of achievement and then not stepping off. Because what are we going to lose then? Well, potentially everything.
Yeah.
You know.
And you risk living a life of disappointment and not. I mean, could you imagine getting to the end of your life? And okay, for me, I cannot imagine this. For the longest time, I've felt a deep desire to live my life as full as I can, and I haven't always been able to do that. Or when I say I haven't been able to, I have chosen not to do that in error. But like you say,
sorry, I'm interrupting you. Maybe that is the essence of responsibility, is just taking ownership for ourselves first and foremost.
Yeah.
Like you just did there now.
Well, I do. I think that's a huge part of it, is to understand, again, not just know where you are, but understand why you are in that space, in that predicament. And I think there's a huge difference between knowing and understanding. You can have knowledge about something. You can know that you're sitting in the house you're sitting in at the time that you're sitting there, but to understand why you're sitting there and what's brought you to that place can help you understand, do I do the same things to move forward, or do I change things because of where I've come from and why I've found myself here?
Sure.
Taking the time to really give thought, to grow vision from that space. I think it's very difficult to do it with simple knowledge rather than understanding. Same as when if you find yourself in where a lot of kids are at the moment with school. You know, you get the knowledge, and I mean for myself as well. High school in particular, wasn't that easy because I've failed to understand the work. I just knew the work. Like I could take a look at the textbook and know this is the math formula, but understanding why it was applied and the way it was applied when it comes to test time is a whole different story. I think in life we know this happens to me, that happens to me, that happens to me, but do you understand why? And how did you respond? And why did you respond that way? And how can you change that kind of response? How will that change your future?
You know, I think people wake up surprised because they allow their lives to evolve. And evolution turns into nevolution because we just allow things to happen. And we use language like that, you know, this is how my business evolved and this is how my life evolved. And then, like you say, we wake up surprised one day. We wake up surprised with like, oh, wow, who is this partner next to me? You know, and they once upon a time had curves like around a mountain, and now they just look like a mountain. Kind of thing, you know. And whose kids are those? And they don't even look like me. And whose dog is this? Whose body is this? What is my life ended up like? And we speak about one day when our life ends. That's again today. It's the day that we wake up surprised at how life has ended up. Not ended, but ended up.
Good.
And I think if we're wake up consciously and wake up with purpose and on purpose, instead of our lives evolving, just going into something, we will know where we went wrong and we'll know how to fix it. And we'll know why we are where we're at today because we'll understand the journey. But like I said, evolution turns into nevolution. We never go any further than what we are now. And so we wake up surprised. And I'm saying, I'm sick and tired of waking up surprised. I want to wake up on purpose.
Absolutely.
I want to know what I'm doing today. You know, it mustn't surprise me that I'm living another day. It must like, oh, wow, I'm blessed with another one. What can I do to give back now?
Yeah.
I've had 42, 43 years of this stuff. I'm halfway through my life. What now? Kind of thing. So by living the day that, here's the question perhaps, is in our responsibility in life, if this was the last day that I had to live physically, how would I? I would love more. I'd forgive more. I'd give more. I'd share more. I'd talk more. I'd connect more. But we take life for granted, so we don't.
Yeah.
And in a space where we're talking about COVID-19 and coronavirus and lockdown, we can easily slip into that space where we allow our lives to evolve. But by the end of lockdown, we're going to wake up surprised that we've done nothing with the time that we've actually been given.
Yeah.
And that's not the government's responsibility, that's ours.
Definitely. And and I think that's so good, you know, waking up at the end of it. Are we going to be surprised because we haven't taken responsibility, or are we going to wake up enthusiastic for what the opportunities are going to lie once we can get out of our four walls, right?
Sure.
So what would you say in terms of taking responsibility now where everyone's at, what would you say are some of the things that they can actually put into practice to start taking more responsibility and applying themselves more intentionally, perhaps?
Getting out of bed.
Yeah, that's a good start.
Seriously, you know, what happens is when you lose track of time in a period like this, you lose track of who you are. And I think today is it the last day of our initial lockdown in South Africa?
Yes.
Oh, it's tomorrow. Is today the last day?
I think it's today.
So we would have ideally finished perhaps tomorrow. Okay. And everybody would have been married to day 22. And we would have got out. And I think to a certain degree that when we got into this lockdown period, DIY went through the roof. Everybody wanted to do something at home because you know what the husbands always used to say, babe, when I got time. When I got time. Nah, they got no excuses. And then there's some of the guys who bought all the stuff and still haven't done anything with it. And all the stuff sitting in the workshop or in the garage or outside, and they've done nothing with it. And they realize, oh my greatness, I've done nothing with what I should have done. Thank the president for an extra 2 weeks, man.
And then you run
because you got time now.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to it, you got an extra 2 weeks. But if you're going to tomorrow with the same mindset you had today,
exactly
by the end of the next 2 weeks, you're gonna look back and say, wow, could we have another 2 weeks?
Sure. So when I'm talking about waking up, I'm talking about waking up with purpose and on purpose.
Yeah.
And what I've had to learn again and again, because I haven't learned anything, I keep learning stuff, not because the lessons are that fantastic, but because the student isn't, perhaps. But, you know, you can't just wake up physically. You've actually got to wake up emotionally, and you've got to wake up mentally, and you've got to have a plan. Have a plan for the day. When I started our lockdown, just before the lockdown happened, we built a chart so that we could actually cross off every single day, so that we could keep track of where we're at. Because days start to morph into one, and it becomes 51st dates and Groundhog Day all in one, and it turns into Fear Factor and Survivor all in one, and you go crazy, and then you're bored, and then you go to sleep, and you're so tired of sleeping that what do? You go back to bed because you're tired. And it's this vicious circle. Yeah. And then you eat because you're hungry, because you're bored. And now you realize, geez, I've eaten too much and I haven't exercised. I'm exhausted from doing that. So what do? You go back to sleep. And this becomes the norm. Yeah. Instead of putting a practical routine in, wake up at 6:30, wake up at 7, start work at 8 o'clock, finish work at 3 o'clock, do some exercise, do some physical stuff, do some mental stuff, change the environment. So stop spending time in the same room that you're always in. Go spend time in a different room in the house. Go spend time outside. Just go walk around. Change what you're taking into yourself as a person on a knowledge level. Have a COVID-free day.
Yeah.
Because I think that we're so consumed by COVID-19. We need these COVID-free days where we don't talk about COVID-19 and we don't talk about coronavirus. We don't talk about lockdown. We don't watch the news because not much has changed except the numbers. Okay. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're just numbers. I'm saying these are people, but you're not going to change that unless you're at home anyway. But the fact is that while you are at home, do something with who you are, with what you have, but wake up physically, wake up emotionally, and wake up mentally.
I think that's great. I think taking the idea of when you say change the room that you're in, I think there's so many of us that have to change the room that our mind is in, the room that our emotions are in, and be more aware. Firstly, I think it was Zig Ziglar who said, "You are who you are and where you are because of what you've put into your mind." And I think this is a great time for people to go. Like we were speaking yesterday, taking social media and actually doing something good for yourself with it. Finding those people who have good content that adds value to your life, not just entertainment, and filling yourself with that. Let that be what your feed looks like for the next couple of months. Let that be what's filling your mind and transforming your mind into something that is more capable than it was beforehand. Go and find things that, if you've wanted to learn how to do something, don't keep saying, I want to do it. I've got all the parts in the garage or whatever the case is. You can go online and you can figure out how to do things for free. The internet today is so incredible. You can go out and find just about everything you're looking for without any cost at all. And the whole thing is going back to what we said right in the beginning, is just do it. You want to learn a different language, just do it and then stick to it. So for myself, and I'll get into this maybe in a different call, and I'll put together maybe a blog post with it, is I believe that if someone wants to change where they're at, there's a three-pronged approach, if you would. The first one is to understand why you are where you are, what you're thinking, understand your environment that you've been a part of, what you've absorbed into your life. And once you've understood it, then the second part is to decide, how are you going to respond? If you have been in a spot where you're constantly negative, or perhaps you think of yourself as very limited in what you can achieve and what you can do in any regard, understand why that's been your thought process, and then decide, when you find yourself in that place again, why don't you just get up and say, cool, that's what I thought about myself, let me go and learn something. Take the trigger of your thoughts and create a response that is going to add value rather than reinforce your initial thoughts. And then thirdly, be consistent in it. Whenever that thought arrives, whenever that situation that you find yourself in presents itself again, understand go back to your understanding, apply the decision that you've made, and just have that resolve to do it again and again and again and again, and you start to see that curve of your life change a little bit. And it doesn't have to be big things. If you don't make your bed in the morning and you want to be more disciplined in your life, start with making your bed and understand why don't I make my bed? Well, maybe because when you were younger you didn't have to, because you had someone who could do it for you. Maybe it was never an expectation of you. But now that you want to, so you understand where it comes from. Now that you understand it, you decide, I want to be more disciplined. This is how I'm going to start. So you've understood it. You've made the decision. The next time you wake up, remind yourself, I've decided to make my bed because it's going to help me be more disciplined. I've decided to make my bed because it's going to make me more disciplined. And so you start to do that until it becomes a habit. And so develop intentionally the habits that you're looking for in your life, so that in 2 weeks' time, should the lockdown come to an end, you've got just a handful more positive habits than you had before.
Absolutely. And I think that's about positioning yourself, because, something that I've been telling people is position yourself for that's next, not
Good.
what's next. When we position ourselves for that's next, we've got a plan.
Yeah.
When we position ourselves for what's next, we got a problem. So position yourself for that's next rather than what's next.